Seriously, woman. 1, 2, 3, go. Hi guys, welcome back. My name is Jaspreet and I'm here today with a glazing tutorial. Today I'm going to show you how I add, it's more like an underglaze tutorial, how I add these underglazes to these decals, these plates that I made. I've already shared the process of how to add the decals and make the plates in an earlier video. Today I'm going to show you how to create this watercolor effect with your underglazes. Now I do use a few different brands of underglazes here, a few different types of underglazes. One is your regular Amaco SMUGS. Well, the palette is dirty. It's well used, it's well loved. Then I also have these underglazes from Walker Ceramics, which is an Australian brand. I picked these up last year when I was there. And some more from Chrysanthos. They have a bunch of these. Let me see. This brand has a bunch of underglazes in pinks, peaches, purples, which go all the way up to cone 10. So that's really exciting, and that's why I picked these up. So these are the ones I'll be using. Also some that I picked up from India. Now I know I have a whole lot of different underglazes I'm talking about. You don't necessarily need these. I am aware that there's another brand called Colors for Earth, which is available in the US, which also has these kind of translucent underglazes. And that's what these are doing. Even Amaco SMUGS, they do really well as translucent underglazes. Even Walker Ceramics and Chrysanthos, these have also worked really well as just translucent colors and not something that blocks the entire surface and you can't see anything underneath. You can see the design underneath, the line work underneath. So that's why I like these underglazes and that's why I've used them. Try with whatever you have at hand and see how that looks. With that, let's get started with the tutorial. I really loved making these. I hope you enjoy it too. So here are my bisque plates. I am not going to wipe them down like I usually do with a damn sponge because this is decal, and if I wipe it with a sponge, it's going to come off. Right now I'm just mixing up my green color. This is something that I used I think last night, so I'm just kind of adding some water and bringing it back to life. Underglazes are a lot like watercolors, so if you add a little bit more water, a little bit more fresh underglaze, they kind of work. Then next I'm using my bamboo brush. It has a really fine tip, so it works really well for this kind of work. And I'm a little bit jittery because I'm starting afresh, but once you get going, then it gets a little bit easier. So I'm starting with the greens, and you will see me mixing up two different greens. I'm starting with a lighter green and adding in all the details in the leaves, the stems. This is a little bit of work, but honestly I'm not very precise when I'm filling in the details here, because once it's glazed, once all the colors come in, it doesn't really matter. I mean, for me, I don't mind a little bit of that color going out of the lines. It's perfectly all right. So I enjoy that. So I am just going to fill it up. It still takes time, even though I'm not that precise. Also, another thing I like to do is I make sure that I cover all the black lines. Even if it's a straight line, I'll still add color to it. Now I'm going to mix up my darker green here. I am using a couple of two different underglazes. This one is from a brand called Walker Ceramics that I picked up from Australia. I am mixing it with one of the darker green Amaco semi-moist underglazes to get a darker, deeper green. And I'm just going to fill up some of the areas of the leaves and the branches and little bit of the bushes around with a mix of the two greens. Some highlights somewhere, some lowlights somewhere. So it's difficult to talk while doing this work. That's why I decided to do a voiceover instead of talking live, because then I'd be really distracted and not really focused on either explaining or filling in the colors. I think we can speed up this part. Now to fill in some of the finer details, I'm just trying out another synthetic brush. This is much finer. I'm going to just see if this works to add some of the more detailed branches. I know I'm doing this, like I said, this is the first plate that I'm working on with all these details. That's why I'm trying out a few different brushes. Eventually I'm going to go back to my bamboo brush because it holds a lot of underglaze and still gives me that fine tip, so I don't have to go back and dip into my underglaze over and over again. So I am going to speed up some of this process because this is kind of boring watching it in real time. Next, I'm going to mix up a color for the glass vase that's holding these flowers. I just mix up some blue, some black, a little bit of random colors, just so I have a slightly muddy bluish color. And then I'm adding the details on the glass vase again with the same brush. This does such a great job. It's just like a watercolor brush. I think that looks good. It's now time to mix up some of the pinks and peaches. Again, I'm using some underglazes from Chrysanthos. Is that what's called? Some Walker ceramics, some underglazes that I got back from India, and some of the Amaco SMUGS. I don't use them full strength. I usually will add a little bit of water to make them a little bit more flowy and easy to use, and also because I'm going for that watercolor effect, I don't want them to be completely opaque. Again, using the same brush, I'm going to go in and start filling in some of the florals. Like I said, I'm going to be mixing up a few different shades, so I'm not going to fill up all the florals with this color. I'm just doing some of them. It's a personal choice. What colors you want, you can go with the same color, dilute it, go darker in certain areas with the same color, or a combination of colors. It's completely up to you. I'm clearly in the mood, so I'm adding a couple of different shades and colors and doing all of that. So this is again one of the colors that I had mixed up last evening. I'm just adding a little bit of water to it, and I'm not even bothered to really wash the brush. I'm using the same brush and just mixing up the color and adding it to the florals. And as you can see, I'm not being very fussy about washing my brushes because it's the same family of colors, the pinks and the peaches. So I am just kind of mixing them, so there's a little bit of variation in the flowers and it's not just one flat color. That's the idea. So honestly, this project looked a little bit more overwhelming, a little bit more daunting to me, given that I had to sit down and mix all the colors and where to start, what colors to use. It was a little bit of an overwhelm, but then I decided to just sit down and let's do 2 greens so that there's a little bit of variation. It looks nicer. Let's do a couple of pinks and peaches. So it kind of started from there, and because I had a bunch of plates to go through, even if one of them didn't work out, I had others to work on. So I think sometimes we are just too scared to work on a piece because it's too pretty and really precious because we spent all this time making it. But sometimes you have to just let go and try it out and see the result. And I was so happy and pleased with the result. So this is what my first filled in plate looks like. You can see all the details. And I'm going to repeat the process. It's the exact same process that I'm going to be using for all of these plates. So I'll show you a few here in fast forward because it's really fun to watch things in fast forward and see the whole thing come together. Enjoy. Now once we have all the flowers and the leaves and the branches and the vases colored in, the next step is adding color to the little beads on the side. For this, I've again mixed up a pinkish reddish color that I'm going to be using, and I'm again using the same bamboo brush that I used earlier. Now this is a slightly more painful process because my attempt here is to fill up the entire ball bead with this colors. So you'll see me struggling a little bit with this brush initially because I have to dip into the underglaze over and over again and make sure it doesn't spread out. Because the brush is big, it holds a lot of underglaze, and that tends to spread out because it's again quite liquid. So I had to clean up a couple of times and go through this cycle. So for this plate, I did struggle with the bamboo brush for quite some time. It took me much longer to finish it up, to add all the details because, like I said, the brush was a little too big for these little beads, and I wasn't able to color them precisely to my satisfaction. So once I finished the tops, I kind of went over them one more time, and then I had to see from the side if all the beads are covered, and then again sit down and add the underglaze there. So it was a little bit annoying. I did not enjoy this part at all. I like that the beads had a different color, but this brush did not work for it. Finally, some sense prevailed and decided to move on to a smaller brush, and this was a lot easier because it was a much smaller brush, so it had a much smaller head, and it had just enough underglaze to kind of add a little dab right at the top of the bead. So it made the process a lot more easier. I could just push the underglaze around a little bit. I had more control over the underglaze while using this particular brush. So I would recommend use a smaller brush, at least for this part of the process. So I did go over these details at least twice to make sure that the underglaze is not too thin and I get a decent coverage. Though I believe for this particular underglaze in these colors that I'm using, you don't really need to. As you can see, this brush definitely helped. Obviously, this is sped up, but this brush definitely helped with the process. It made it a lot more easier and controlled to add the underglaze. As you can see, as I was doing more of these, it became a lot easier to color these in and also to let go. I think sometimes, especially with the first piece, you're a little bit more particular about, how the color's landing and it's not going out of lines. But as you do more of these, it just becomes a lot more easier. You can see here the process has become a little bit more streamlined. So it helps to do these things in batches. I think that's enough. You don't need to see more of this, but that's pretty much the process. The last bit of the process was to add some clear glaze and glaze fire, and I'll show you what they look like after the glaze firing.